Hey, good people, this is Jerry and I down back with another YouTube reflection. And this is a personal journal for contemplative people looking to think, grow, and have impact in the world. So, hey, I am going to do something for the very first time here. And I hope it is not my last time, but it's definitely the first. And what I'm going to do is respond to one of my followers who posted a comment on one of my YouTube videos, but it was in response to some content that I put out on my podcast. So I want to really expand upon his comment. I believe it's a guy. I want to expand upon his comments because I think it has value. I think his comments had value for me, and it made me want to think and reflect. And so I wanted to do that out loud. So I hope that's okay with you guys, and I hope more of you will feel comfortable sharing your ideas with me, and then I can continue to think um, that through. The only reason why I am doing this publicly is because he made his comment to me publicly. Otherwise, I have received comments via email that are private, and I keep those private. But I think by nature of his comment being made public, I think I'm within my rights to reflect publicly, especially if this is not charged or controversial. So I feel like I'm in good space to do this out loud. All right, so um, a few weeks ago, I did an episode called Elevation on the podcast. And in that reflection, I was doing two things. Number one, I was saying, hey, I'm in a good space. This podcast journal, this project of me using this podcast to do a public journal, a public personal journal, has really served me well. I have been able to work through some really difficult um, things, some difficult experiences, some difficult conditions, some very personal things, very painful things. I've been able to do it, and I've grown through this project. And I'm not wrestling with those things anymore. So there's been growth for me. The other thing I did in that episode called Elevation is that I talked about there being a drop in my downloads for the podcast. Um, and I was like, and I already don't have a high followership through that project, but it has been a growing followership all the same over the past year and a half. So I'm like, my numbers aren't increasing. Like it's a slow crawl. Like every maybe once a month, I'll get a new follower. That's slow, but I also own the fact, as an INTJ, I own the fact that I am not strategically committed to this project because it's not about anything other than me having a place to talk publicly, to reflect publicly. And what I know about the reflection process and the learning process, that there is a certain element, there's a certain opportunity for reflecting when you do it publicly that doesn't exist when you do it privately. And so I'm using this project to have access to public reflections for me to grow. All right, so this is a growth project for me, and I always say that if someone else is going to benefit from me doing these private reflections out loud or these personal reflections in a public way, then that's win-win, right? Okay. So even though I do give myself permission to have a slow crawl, a slow growth in terms of my metrics with the project, I do still look at the metrics. I'm still an INTJ. I'm just not committing. I'm not doing a lot of strategy here. And there was a drop in my downloads. And I'm like, that's a new phenomenon. We're not having like a fast growth, but we're not dropping in our downloads. And so anyway, in that particular episode, I was contemplating, like, wonder what that's about. And so this particular follower came on to weigh in on two of those questions that or two of those treatments, two of those considerations in that episode. One was to One is where I acknowledged my growth and what I was doing with the project, and the other was to talk about what could be impacting the downloads for me. So that's what he did. And so I want to respond to that, okay? So I want to say I'm always excited when I get feedback from followers. And I know that you guys are out there listening, but it's encouraging when I get the feedback where you make that, where you make your existence real, right? I'm imaginative. You all exist inside of my imagination, and I'm quite okay with that. I live in my imagination. But when you become sensory data for me, that's cool. It's just like a bonus. It's like, oh, that's nice. And so I'm talking to you, the person who made this comment, and I'm sure you're going to listen to this because I'm going to tell you on your comment to come looking for this reflection. When you drop that comment into my one of my YouTube videos, it made my day, and so I wanted to say thank you for that. I want to respond to you. To me, you made 2 points. I want to respond to your second point first because in my mind that's the easiest one. And you were speculating with me about what could be a reason the downloads have dropped, and you were saying when I do my disclaimers 15 minutes in, that might be a challenge for some people because by the 15th minute, I've already drawn you in, right? So you guys are prepared for me to do my disclaimers, or as you called it, my introduction. You're prepared to experience that introduction at the beginning of the reflection. But by the 15th minute, I'm already in it. And so to stop at the 15-minute mark to do my introduction or my disclaimers, you were speculating that it might be a little jarring. And I've kind of had that wonder myself. And I haven't put a lot of weight in that wondering just because this project is evolving and I'm maturing in it. So there was a time when I wasn't doing the disclaimers. I think I started the disclaimers at the beginning of season 2, but all of season 2 really was about a very clunky treatment of those disclaimers. I mean, sometimes those disclaimers would last for about 15 minutes because I would fall into several rabbit holes. And I think towards the end of season 3, I started solidifying. The disclaimers. Like, it's a pretty concrete way that I do those disclaimers. Now, every once in a while, I expand. I'm still playing around with the disclaimer around critical race feminism. I'm not yet resolved that that's the way to do it, but for the most part, my disclaimers have become concrete. So that's one reason why I've been worried about the disclaimers in terms of the placement, because I've been focused on consolidating those disclaimers because they've been so, windy. And so I feel pretty good about that. Now, one of the things I've done in season 4 that I wasn't doing in season 3 consistently is that I'm consistently trying to get those disclaimers under the 15-minute mark. I am playing around with trying to do it in the first 5 minutes, but I can't yet lock that in because it depends on the kind of reflection I'm doing, right? It depends on my setup. Sometimes the reflection is so located in my introverted intuitive space, I can't access it. So I have to have the room to set the reflection up. But when I when I hit the record button and I know exactly what I want to talk about, that's when those disclaimers can be located at by the 5th minute. but I'm working on it. I'd love to be able to do all of my reflections within, excuse me, all of my disclaimers within the first 5 minutes. But just so you know, I'm working on it, and I think you might be right. And I love hearing that maybe um, that it's disjointed when you hear those disclaimers or the introduction at the 15-minute mark. So I actually agree with you. Um, at least it makes me curious, and I really appreciate the feedback. I only have a few minutes left, and I really wanted to spend some more time in this other piece where you talked about liking the episodes that I consider as drama driven, and you said, yeah, those are the ones you like. But you didn't agree with me. You don't agree that I'm calling it drama. Well, it's drama for me. It's drama for me. As an INTJ, I just don't want to be, I don't like lingering in conversations that feel like loopy or like it's dealing with emotions. It's dealing with unnecessary emotions. Um, Even though it's a very real part of the human experience, which is why I force myself to share those episodes. It's very difficult for me to hit the release button, but as an INTJ, I don't want to linger in that. I don't. But sometimes I have to process things in my emotional world, things in my social world that just does not make sense. And I But so I don't want to do it. But what I do appreciate about your feedback, and this is something I do wonder, like, I don't know if I'm attracting other INTJs to this project. Um, but I always, there's what's called the second gaze, and it comes from conversations around the history of Black people in predominantly white spaces. It comes from this idea of the white. Anyway. So I don't want to get into that right now. But the second gaze basically says that while I'm doing a project, I'm always also mindful of someone else who is different from me or who is like me, and what would they say about this project. So it makes me wonder, what would an INTJ, I'm in a different room, so if you hear an echo, I can explain that later. Oh, it doesn't matter. Ask me about it if you're curious. Anyway, um, what would an INTJ say about me lingering in those emotions? What would an INTJ say about me giving two craps about this drama, excuse me, these social situations? And so I have that always running in the backdrop, but then I am not aware of what a personality type beyond an INTJ. But I don't fully get how other people would experience it, my reflections. I know how I would be as an INTJ listening to another person lingering in what I would call the drama. Even though I do appreciate when I listen to other INTJs reveal that part of themselves. Like, how are you really interacting in the day to day world, right? It's not all about what's in your head. How are you dealing with the day to day world? So, anyway, I wanted to just tell you that it does feel like drama to me, but I do appreciate that it may not sound like trauma to someone else. And then the last thing, because I gotta go, is you asked me to expound on dealing with feeler men in the workplace, and I was like, ooh, when have I done that? And it's just I have, but not like intentionally. So it makes me curious about my experience with feeler men at the workplace. I'm going to be thinking more about that, but I don't really have a response right now. But you have definitely piqued my curiosity. Again, I thank you for coming and giving me this feedback. I think this, and I appreciate your listening, your commitment to this project. Okay, you guys, if this reflection has had any value for you, please give it a heart. If this conversation about downloads and feeler people and drama and disclaimers, if any of that relates to conversations you've had in the world, I don't know how it would, but please share this out. And if my moving about in this reflection caused some randomness in you, I would love to hear it. You can find me on my website at yournidom.wordpress.com, okay? Or Twitter, UrinIDom1, and then of course YouTube. You're in IDOM. And I do have a Facebook page up. I just haven't set it up completely. It's been a pleasure hanging out with you. Until I come back, be well. Bye.